Rajneesh? What is mental health? Even though we know everything about it, but it sometimes gets confusing. Are they saying mental disease? Can you just give us some more information about it, Rajneesh?
Yeah, I think it's a really excellent question to start off. I think there is no split between the body and the mind. So, when somebody says that they are mentally ill, it could be as simple as somebody complaining of not having enough energy, not sleeping well, not having things which taste as well, not enjoying things which you would have enjoyed. To the other end of the spectrum, when things are really difficult, that they are thinking, what's the point of this? Do I need to carry on? So I think it's a spectrum. And the important thing to recognize is that 1 in 4 people in their lifetime would have serious mental illness. This we talk about depression, anxiety, worry. And I think that's quite accurate. I know my own family, myself. Depression doesn't spare anyone, or serious mental illness. But the important thing is to recognize there is no mental illness without the physical element of things. So if you are having mental stress, it does manifest itself with your thoughts, behavior, but also what happens to your body, what happens to your sleep, what happens to your attention, and concentration. So I think there is a spectrum of issues, and that also gives us opportunity to look at things not just medically, but also other ways of managing it.
Okay, sounds good. So tell me which part, so Dr. Lokesh, tell me which stage of life is mental well-being more important, or is there a stage, or it has to be equally important throughout a childhood, adolescent, or adulthood, or during senior life?
Actually, mental health is like, when the child is in the womb itself, it starts. Okay. Because the relationship of the mother with her husband, and what is the family support she is getting, what is the emotional turmoil or happiness she is going through when she's carrying the child. So that is the time the mental health actually starts, because there are depressions reported just
Okay.
of delivery. Every phase of life, mental health is very essential, just like the physical health, like how we carotenoids or facing mental health issues again and again and again. But we are not addressed because there is lack of awareness related to that. And adolescent is the most crucial age, because that is the age where I mean, like you, absolutely, we had no idea like what we are doing with life, and we had no goals at all at the time, and we had no orientation, because socializing was the biggest event for us. Saying hi to friends and talking to them and not getting shamed in the group of. Then we pass on to the adulthood. In the adulthood, again, like, taking the responsibility of the life, then getting married. Marriage is one of the biggest stressor, as we all know. And sometimes losing your loved ones in the process, father, uncle, or anybody. And following that, having a child. And then again, like, coming to the age where you have parents who are actually needing your help, just like your child, or how they had taken care of you once, probably you would like to take care of them again. So the mental health is a process from the time in a day, if it is something like from the time you wake up and till the next time you wake up, like, it's even in your sleep, the mental health is revealing itself in the form of dreams, in the form of disturbed sleep, in the form of pains and aches in the body. So it's a ongoing process. What like, this is what I would like to help educators to add this content in the school, where mental health starts from the time mother gets pregnant.
Very nice indeed. In fact, I don't think we usually think about that stage, even though we know we take care of the mom well to make sure she eats well. But we really have not, focused on how her mental health status, because the baby's mental health starts there as well. So very good point you brought forward, Dr. Lokesh. Thank you so much. So Dr. Nilla, let's talk about mental health. I know Rajneesh touched on it a little earlier. So let's talk about the types, so such as anxiety disorders. So if any of you or Dr. Nilla, can you talk to us about what are the major characters, or how is it characterized, these mental health disorders or illness?
Um, I would say like mental illness or mental disorders, people from a general common man's perception, what has been portrayed through media's movies, they visualize mental illness as a psychotic event or something going to the extreme of depression and suicide. So there's a lot of other in that spectrum, which is easily missed, and people don't either recognize or acknowledge them as mental illness. So when we see through psychotic illness like schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, yes, they are their major mental illness, but there are lots of other common mental illness and issues. Yes, depression is one of that, but anxiety. There's a lot of people going through anxiety. School kids, they start with anxiety. Social anxiety is so common in that age group. And then you have the personality disorders. When there's a loss, there's a grief. When there's any change in their lives, there's an adjustment disorder. So there's a multitude of problems in this umbrella of mental illness. And it's easy for people to sometimes normalize it, and sometimes it's easy for the professionals to over medicalize normal problems too. So it's usually it should be carefully looked on to and attended to.
Very good. Thank you so much. It's a great segue from my question to Michelle. Michelle, I think it's okay to have a mental illness. I think many of us do. It's upsetting that many of us do put it in a negative, connotation, having mental illness, right? Especially those who have no idea about what goes on. But so, can you tell us about how you have addressed? From your perspective as a professional, and dealing with your mental health well-being, and also running a family, going to work, going to school.
I think
Give us a little more perspective of who you are. That's what I think I want to ask.
okay, yeah, so I've had
Michelle, can you increase your volume?
yeah, I can definitely, I can talk louder.
Yeah, that'll be great.
I think if anyone would have who have known me as a childhood or in high school or in college and not known me since then, they would never would have known that I have been struggling my entire life. No one would have known. I felt like I think I played a very good. I'd be a good actress. I had this huge facade where, on the outside, people thought I was extremely happy, very energetic, just full of life. But what people didn't know is that I was always fighting my mind of self-worth, not being worth anything. I felt, even as a child, there was a lot of, I could go on for hours about what I think contributed to my depression, and later on bipolar and borderline personality disorder, which was what I was diagnosed when I was, almost when it was too late. I remember just having to please everybody and just trying to set an example to other people that they expect of me. And in the meantime, I was struggling for love. I was struggling for nourishment, and but as a child, I didn't know that I needed those things. As a child, I thought it was normal as a child, I thought it was normal to have thoughts of death and have ideations of suicide and wanting to die. I honestly thought for most of my life, I thought that was normal. And so when things progressed, in 2010, for an example, in 2010, everything compounded, and my colleagues, no one thought that I was struggling, and I was crying constantly. But yet I was such a good employee. I was excelling in my career in working in public health. And that's the irony, is that I work in public health. I should know better. But it doesn't, mental illness does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. And I felt I had no support, because I would throw out little bit of nuggets of I'm struggling, but they were dismissed. And so in my mind is like, there's no one who can help me. So in my mind, there was nobody who could help me, but yet I was working. I was still doing extremely well in my work. I was going to school at the same time. I was getting my second master's while I was working full time. At the same time, I had 2 children. I had a 1-year-old. In 2010, it was a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And that's actually what was I think the ultimate trigger was here. I had a 7-year-old who was so happy, and she was just a typical child. And I saw myself as that 7-year-old, like I didn't have any of that. At 7, I was trying to kill myself. At 7, I was crying constantly and I would pray to die. I wanted to die. So it just was these thoughts I could not control anymore. And I guess I was high functioning depressed, but no one knew until I ended up trying to made a very detailed plan. I was planning for months of my suicide. So after that, the shock with my colleagues, because I spent a month away. I was a week in inpatient and then a whole month in outpatient. And so some of my colleagues learned of what was happening, and they all thought it was their fault. And I kept saying like, oh no, it's not your fault. I've been dealing with this my entire life. It just came to a point where I honestly, my body I could not do it anymore. And I just thought the best way for me and the best way for everybody was to end my life. And it's not one person. It was accumulation and my own struggles. So, I mean, so in terms of working, no one knew. And that's what's scary, is that no one knew that I was struggling. And yet I was still working extremely well. I was doing my classes. I was raising a family. I was working, all of that. And
so Michelle, you said you were working extremely well. Was that a way to deviate your mind from the inner struggles? Because you used the extremely well twice or thrice.
Yeah, I think so. I think also my desire to stay busy, constantly having to do something. I remember between my first master's and my second master's, there was a time period where I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. I put my child to bed. I didn't have any work I didn't have any readings. I didn't have to write. I felt myself like I'm bored. So when you're in a state of, I wouldn't say boredom, but when you're not keeping yourself busy, your mind goes crazy. Like I'm constantly self-defeating, self-sabotaging. I'm constantly, I'm dwelling into my own emotions and my own, what I thought was lack of self-worth. I wasn't worth living. So it was almost like a compensation to help me cope, is to constantly stay busy. But that's not healthy. So
right.
it does come to a point where like you just can't handle it. And I was very high functioning. I remember constantly going from meeting to meeting, still crying in between meetings at work, and constantly trying to fight myself of like not trying to think about death so much. I was constantly thinking about wanting to die so much. It just consumed me. It absolutely consumed every waking moment.
Right. And so do you feel that after you seeked help with the support system that you have, things have turned out to be better?
Yeah, so that was 2010. And then I'm not sure, Nazeera, if you knew that I actually had another episode in 2016, so only 4 years ago. I was taken off my medication mainly to possibly figure out if it was affecting another health issue. I have other chronic health issues, autoimmune issues. And so the thought was, well, you're doing so well. This is my GI doctor was saying, you're doing so well, you have a good support system. How about if we take you off the antidepressant and see if that will fix the autoimmune issue the intestinal issue I was having at the same time. And of course, my naive self, like, well, yeah, I have a great support system. I have in-laws that love me. I have my husband that loves me. I have people who are very much attuned to my struggles and know when to step in if they need to. But that was a bad idea. A lot of triggers, pretty much the same thoughts of self-defeat and lack of self-worth, lots of risky behaviors I was engaging in just because I didn't care. I wanted to die. And what was even more scary is that I actually said in 2016, I've actually said to 4 different people the day of that I said, I'm not going to make it through the weekend. I'm going to kill myself. I have actually said it to 4 different people that morning. And that's scary. And that night I ended up trying to take my life. And the thought was, we didn't know it was that emergent. I knew it was, but I think the people didn't think it was that emergent. Like, well, you'll be fine, just make it through the weekend. Like, no, I'm not going to make it through the weekend. I remember saying that to somebody. I'm not, and it was a colleague. It was a person I was working with on a project. And I told her, it was at a Chick-fil-A in Atlanta. And I said, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to survive this weekend. And I don't think she knew really what to do at that point, but none of the people I spoke to, who I explicitly said, I'm going to kill myself, none of them thought it was emergent, which is a problem. I know my husband was one of them, and he was trying to seek me a counselor during that day, but we didn't think to take me to the hospital that morning. But when everybody went to bed that night, I sent out goodbye messages to my dearest friends, and I tried to take my life. So I think that was a big wake-up call that I explicitly said I was going to do it, and I did.
It's a little bit, sometimes unreal, but for outside, but it is real. What goes on in your mind and how it impacts the ones surrounding you of not knowing the uncertainties. So Michelle, again, I thank you for your courage. I thank you for everything you do to open up people's mind to a broader perspective of what mental health issues can be and how people don't recognize of their colleagues. So Carolyn, you jumped in at the right time because the next question was for you. If you can unmute yourself, Carolyn, and Michelle, we're going to come back to you with other questions. Carolyn, taking care of one's mental health is as important as taking care of physical health, right? So how do you think anxiety and depression both interfere with adults or with youth of this age? And if you can, from your experience, how are mental health issues affecting young people?
Well, mental illness is real. It is so real, and young people are really struggling, these days. They're dealing with, well, now because of COVID-19, they're dealing with a lot of isolation. When they were in school, they were dealing with a lot of bullying and peer pressure. And with all of this hatred in the world now, they're trying to figure out where they fit in, especially African American males. They're afraid of the police. So there's a lot of things that's causing a lot of anxiety in today's society. And then there's the systemic racism. So in our African American community, we're dealing with a whole lot of issues, that stem from inequality, injustice, lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, those kind of things. And from my personal experience, as you know, when we worked together, my niece was very successful and she didn't fit any of those stereotypes.
And what did she do? What was she doing? Your niece, what was she doing?
She had her own daycare.
Okay.
And she was suffering in silence and nobody knew. And when I found out that she was struggling, I told her husband to bring her to me. And she was with me for 2 days before she had a psychotic break, and she really lost touch with reality. And there I was, getting ready to come into the office that day when she opened up my shower door, and she was standing there with the largest butcher knife from my kitchen. And she said, "I'm going to kill myself and then kill you." So, that just really shocked me because I knew she was struggling, but I had no idea that it was that severe. And because she didn't fit any of those stereotypes, she was doing extremely well in her business. She had a loving husband. She had a beautiful home, a beautiful, beautiful son. So I didn't know that she was having those kinds of issues with the anxiety and schizophrenia until it was too late. And she did, stab me several times and she killed herself. So as a result of that, I decided to create mental health in the African American community so we could remove the stigma and break the chains of silence, because so many people are suffering in silence and we just don't know who they are until these things kind of surface. So what we want to be able to do is open the dialogue and get more young people talking about their anxieties, talking about what causes them to feel depressed and stressed and suicidal, because the more we talk about it, the more we can find solutions to the problems before they get to a point of no return. So that's what we're doing now. It's just kind of unmasking, the different situations and trying to find solutions.
So, Carolyn, yes, I remember that you didn't come to office and everybody was talking about it. I mean, for us, it was, we couldn't comprehend, but seeing you after all these years, you just didn't go through it, but you're doing something about it. Did you have any sort of PTSD, or like,
Yes.
how did you cope?
Yeah, it was very traumatic. I took a year off from work and I had to go to therapy, physical therapy, because I had severe wounds. And I went to, mental health therapy. I had a psychiatrist, a therapist, and then it just took a while for me to learn to coexist with the pain and the loss, because my niece and I were very close. And actually, Nazeera, it took me 5 years. It took me 5 years to kind of wrap this whole thing around my head so I could learn to turn my pain into purpose. And so now I'm more focused, and I have a better understanding as to what I'm supposed to do, going forward and trying to, remove the stigma and break the chains of silence.
Sure, and thank you so much for sharing. And sorry, guys, and those who are watching us, I do personally become emotional because I've gone through some of this stuff as well. My mom lost her life. She overdosed when she was 47. So, and I know you're able to say 5 years to heal, and it's been like 2 decades, and I'm still healing, and I'm and still I become emotional. So it's a very tough topic unless we are in someone's shoes. So that's why my entire purpose of this life is like, be kind, be compassionate. We just don't know what others are going through. So and it becomes this, and I wanted to talk about Michelle and y'all, that it's not just you who are suffering, because the people around you're impacting, right? Those who leave the life and take their life themselves, but it's the people who they leave behind, who also suffer in shame and being stigmatized. and don't know how to react to the society. So I think this is something we should continue to discuss and continue to talk about. How do we prevent? How do we identify? How do we prevent? And the worst part was I was a budding physician and I couldn't save my mom. So that's why mental health is something personal to me, on understanding others, having been in that shoe and suffering in darkness and silence and stigmatized, stigmatizing myself for many years, to open up, to heal. So with that, I want to go to Shama. Shama, women, I think we're not yet in the equality or equity stage in the world arena, but we do have our own cultures, traditions, belief system that we come from. But one thing that usually doesn't get discriminated is domestic abuse, right? And domestic abuse it can happen either way. A woman can be abused by a man, or a man can be abused by a woman. And as we are all speaking, I see all the psychiatrists shaking their head or nodding their head, which I am thinking they're understanding, because this is what they talk about they hear from their patients as well every day. So my question, Shama, is, home away from home, women go into different countries. And what do you think, Shama, are the factors that women are not able to stand up against domestic abuse? How are we supposed to raise our children, both men and women, so mental health isn't, so domestic abuse doesn't come to the forefront, or shouldn't happen?
Thank you, Nazeera. That's a good question. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate anybody. It can be man, it can be a woman, it can be educated, it can be uneducated, it can be rich and poor people. So women, especially for North Family Services, our focus in immigrants and refugees community. However, we help anybody. So these women, when they come in here to the state, the husband bring them, or the abuser bring them here. They bringing them with an idea that will have a good life, a good, for themselves and for the children. They came, some of them a dentist, some of them eye doctor, physician, or some of them they're being lawyers. But when they come in here to the States, they face a different reality. First of all, they're struggling with the language. Most of these women, they don't have a language. That's a stress for them. How she can communicate? How can she even if she call up the police, how can she communicate with the police? And sometimes we find the abuser is telling the police and is not telling the truth. That's another stress. Also, most of these women, they don't work. They don't have a family support to support them. So domestic violence, it's a big issue in our community and in every community. It's not about Asian community. It's not about Middle East community. It's all over the world. It's a big issue. To answer your question, how to deal with this issue, I believe we provide education. If we educate children, at early age, and to teach them healthy family relationship, we will not end up with it. We will not end up with this domestic violence. So we have to be very careful, when we're providing a program, because these children, if we don't stop domestic violence, it's become a cycle from one generation to another generation. Oh, I saw my dad is doing that to my mom. That is normal, to do that. Or I can do it to my sister. I can do it to my girlfriend. And also, when this woman, when we do intake with them, they don't think domestic violence, it's a crime in here in USA. The person should be punished. But their think about it, it's a norm, a family norm, and they don't have no clue about what are their rights. So basically, when the client they call us, we have to do an assessment. We have to make sure they are safe, and we have to put them either at the shelter or at the hotel, and then we try to help them to make sure they know their right, to educate them. We say this is not right, and this is what is to happen. And also, it's not dealing with that part. Also, when we are doing with it, women, they cannot make their decision. They have to wait for family member who are overseas or in here or out of state to make a decision for them. you know. So, you know, I believe, like, you know, providing services to the client at this moment, and at the same time we have to educate our next generation about domestic violence and the effects of domestic violence. Obviously, like domestic violence, it has a very impact on women that we are serving.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for your service. And I know there are other organizations that exist as well, but I think it takes a lot of courage to listen to those women suffering, and for you all to come out and help them out. So thank you, Shama. I'll come back to you. And Naresh. So Naresh, how do you think the senior community is holding on during? I know you have very good community connection. Are you seeing any mood disorders or just anxiety among seniors during the lockdown? And it's been almost 6 months now.
Indeed. First of all, I want to thank you so much for having this particular event. It's a lot of opening and lots of knowledge. People are sharing their personal experiences so openly, and it's opening so much of awareness. Obviously, going back to your question about the seniors, yes, indeed, there are lots of things that are changing today because of the COVID. We have come to know, you know, I want to share with you something about our community itself. Our Bhakta Samaj, a small community of around 4,000 people here, families. We have a routine Zoom meeting every week, twice a week, that we host and we engage people in. The seniors, the question about the seniors engaging in dealing with this particular difficult time, there are two sides actually. Some are really liking it because now they have, the families are with them because it's not how much of a distance as because people are working. So now more, there is some gatherness has increased. At the same time, there are seniors who are really afraid of because they are not able to see the children because of, they are maybe in two different homes. And then continuous preparedness and protection from this COVID infection and whatnot. That has also created some sort of, you know, it's like fear or something. But overall, the family bonding, the community relationship through our as a unified community, we are doing much better. I think I can say that it has not impacted that heavily because of the family bonding. You know, everything is about the culture, as you know, Nazeera, that how obviously we are not able to host our events the way we normally do, perhaps maybe once a month or maybe twice a month, but still there are this particular channel of the digital media today has is been able to connect. So seniors are having some sort of relief. I want to share with you something about my own father-in-law and my uncle actually. I did not saw my father-in-law for almost 3 months. A couple of days ago, we had get together at my sister's home, and when you can feel it, the engagement, the love, the happiness when they are able to see them in person, obviously with some sort of distance, but at least they are able to see the children, grandchildren, and interact with them. So obviously it has both sides of impact. This is basically, I would say that COVID has put us so much of a dent in many areas that we have never seen. And it has changed our definitely living. And another thing, as you already know about my engagement on that social media part of it, like the funeral services, the weddings, where the seniors are also always looking for to go attend the religious event, you know, the prayers and whatnot. They're not able to see those things. So all those things did make some impact in that part. But at the other hand, as I said, children are home, so they are having a little bit more bond than ever before. That's what I would say.
Very nice. We can't help but notice a wonderful couple picture behind you, but I'm going to come back and ask you who they are. Before I want to ask Rajneesh the next question. Rajneesh, in your Dr. Rajneesh, in your medical practice, have you come across patients or people from the public who don't believe anxiety and depression are real medical conditions, or what do you say to them?
I think with mental illness, there is a level of vulnerability as well, that admitting to mental illness is seen as a failure, and it's not just at a certain age group or a certain sex or certain religion or races. It's across the spectrum. So just giving an example is, you routinely hear when kids are in the playground, for example, they're not aware of certain things, and they may use pejorative words with regards to bullying or name calling about mental illness, and part of the role for the schools and parents is that awareness, that actually and getting the stigma out of the way. So at the very early stage itself, it is to understand that mental health, anybody could become mentally ill. It's not just linked to age, religion, social class, and also as they move on through life, it's actually quite common to see the teenagers, girls and boys, get into an internal world where they are spending a lot of time on virtual friends, virtual messages, Twitter, Instagram, and it's very difficult because some of the messages could be quite sharp, quite hard, and they don't feel comfortable to talk to their parents about it, about how they look, how they feel, how they think, and they are always comparing with somebody at that in the instant Instagram world. So the mental illness can happen at any age group. The awareness of mental illness can happen at any age group. And it's actually being aware that if it can happen for a child, it can happen for a teenager, it can happen for a middle-aged man, it can happen for an elderly person. And it can happen when you're married, you can be single, you could be divorced, you could have it at any stage. The important thing to recognize is that it is part of us. We are just one life event away from serious disturbance to our own mental health, whether it's your health, parents' health, illness, whatever it is, or no reason. Mental illness can just precipitate itself just out of the blue. So it's important to recognize that it can happen to anybody, and not feel afraid to talk about it, not feel afraid to ask for help, not feel stigmatized by it, and similarly treat others with respect when they are going through a difficult time.
Sure. And while I still have you on, what problems are people facing in the new normal, the COVID-19 era?
So I do write. So I wrote an article for the British Journal of Psychiatry.
And I was so proud
BMA,
you.
Sorry, yeah.
I was so proud of you. I forwarded it to all my network. So
yeah,
guys, I'm telling you in public, I'm so proud of Dr. Rajneesh because he's my batchmate and he wrote an article on. Go ahead.
No, so it is for the British Medical Association. I'm in my different role. I'm also a union rep for the doctors. So with that role, about health anxieties, I wrote an article with my junior doctor in the COVID times, and it's quite interesting because there are two groups of people when it comes to COVID. So one group of people who've got the illness, and they have their own complications about life and death and whether they make through it. The other group of people who are actually worried that they'll get ill, and because it's not visible, that the coronavirus is not visible, the only information you get is through, I don't know how it was in US, but in UK, we went through a long period of up to 3 months where things literally ground to halt, people working from home. So you lost your usual connections of friends, work colleagues, routines, and you were communicating to everybody through media and not having that physical contact. People became more and more anxious, worrying about, and that manifested in different ways. Some people put on weight, some people lost weight, some people, the sleep cycle got disturbed. Some people started having morbid thoughts of following certain line of information on the web. So for example, they would just say how many people died of COVID today, and then they want to check which countries people died of COVID, and how long did they take before they die of COVID. So it becomes not just your thoughts, it's your meta thoughts, thought on top of thought, which then leads to further reading and further reinforcing and further communicating with people who have similar ideas about more death. What people never did sometimes, some people did actually, which was actually, how do I get back to normal? And how do we feel grounded? And I'll talk about that a bit later about it. But part of it is that health anxieties went through the roof, and at different age groups. So for example, in the elderly, because they were high risk of death from COVID, government had very clear guidelines that they're completely shielded, so you couldn't visit. So I couldn't visit my in-laws, just literally a few houses down the road. I couldn't visit them because I was working in hospital. I would be probably at risk of bringing. So they had a system where they would rely on coming and checking on you for your clothes, for your food or social contact. Completely got cut off. Children who were going to school suddenly were told you're working from home. So that structure was lost. So children are at home, and you lose structure of working from patients. Who, as a psychiatrist, most of you will pick it up. A lot of things we pick up is body language, the transference you get when you speak to somebody. Everything is lost when you're on Zoom and Skype. So all those things which otherwise would have kept you grounded were simply lost, and it was lost in the field of having an invisible enemy that you couldn't see, but you had to do certain things, certain rituals to keep yourself safe. And there wasn't an end in sight. So all those things made people more and more anxious, whether they started off with anxiety or it became manifest after that. Yeah, that's my experience, and that's why I wrote the article.
Definitely, and thank you so much for the real input and feedback out there, Rajneesh. So, Dr. Lokesh, I'm coming to you right after this question with Dr. Nila. Dr. Nila, do you think mental? So, tell us what are probably the complications of prolonged or untreated anxiety and depression? This question is for Dr. Nila, and then Dr. Lokesh, I have another question for you.
Prolonged untreated anxiety or depression. So we can just separate them to two. So anxiety, if we talk about anxiety, there is a reluctance for the individual suffering from anxiety to first come up and ask for help, because anxiety as such stops them from coming for help. They're worried to step into, in severe anxiety, they're worried to even step out of the home. So, and if they make an effort and come there, it is not a one quick fix method in the treatment. Like, you don't give a tablet and it's done. Anxiety needs a bit of a long-term management therapy. They need to go through talking with a psychologist. Again, there's a need for effort there to go and meet with the psychologist. So there's lots of barriers for these individuals suffering from anxiety. And then they need to find the right match with the psychologist. And as I said, again, that long-term path. But when they go through a phase where they either because of anxiety or they get fed up and they disconnect, disengage, then obviously, yes, it does affect their life on a long term. There are people who are unable to step out of the home to go even for their day-to-day shopping. And then you start thinking about their work, career, social life, everything's lost. And obviously then it can lead on to the other comorbidities like depression. They feel they lose their self-esteem, they feel their life is worthless. They just struggle to cope with this distress on a day-to-day basis. So I feel that, yes, it is hard for the individuals to recognize that at their time of distress, but that is why we need all this awareness and the family support, the community support, friends, colleagues, everyone to help them to get to the right support and be there with them until they are on the right phase to, walk on by themselves.
Definitely. So, Dr. Nila, what's your secret to staying so much awake at 1:30 a.m.?
I'm so interested in this topic. I'm a GP, and then I decided to take up psychiatry because I love this aspect of mental health, and I think maybe that's the reason.
Okay, and awesome. So it is 1:30 a.m. in Australia, and thank you for staying really wide awake for us to discuss this topic. Dr. Lokesh, let's talk about two things, Dr. Lokesh. One is just the treatment modalities or even the causes of mental health. I think some of the questions from attendees is if my family member has a mental illness, how much should I expect that to happen to me? So probably they want to know the genetic cause, or so I want you to touch base on that a little bit about the cause, and also I want us to talk about some of the treatment modalities that exist.
Okay. Basically, we have a different statistics for our different diseases, but in general, like if you have to commonly believe that what is the percentage that one person can, we have that monozygotic, like if you are born twins, are the more 50% chances are there. Otherwise, the chances stop, like it starts getting lesser and lesser and lesser. The most important thing about responsiveness related to the treatment in mental health is like if there was an earlier mental health, a person suffering with the mental ill health, and whatever the response they were giving for the whatever the molecules they were giving. Usually, like we prefer to use similar kind of molecules on the people. But most important thing is like it's all biological, and people have to understand, like I congratulate Michelle that she was able to recognize her problem and she was able to say it out, but she didn't know what to do about it. And it was really wonderful to listen to her the way she narrated, because we usually read it in the textbook, and I could actually perceive that intensity of an individual, because we always think like, why did they do it, why did they do it, why did they do it. So I got an idea like you need not to have any significant stressor or a problem from the external world, but internal turmoil propels you to just to get rid of that hesitation, stress and frustration, just to make you get out of it, like it may propel you to attempt a suicide and things like that. So that was one wonderful insight I got. When people have to believe that it's a neurobiological disorders, these do not come from the wish of anybody or will of anybody. The common myth that people carry about mental illness is like, you have a poor will. You should be strong enough. You should see, I had a similar problem. This is how I overcame. You overthink about these problems. So why do you overthink about them? Think about something else. Think about God. I mean, get into some activity, do some gym. There are thousands and thousands of advices are given to people who are suffering from mental health, because the intensity of the problem can never be understood by the other person who doesn't go through the problem at the same time. That is the reason like why it has got a lot of stigmatizing, and it is associated with the strong will. As you had asked the question, like why people seek less mental health support is because they feel there is something wrong with them. They don't think it's biologically wrong with them. See, I have a diabetes, so I have a biologically something wrong with him. I have a cardiac problem, so it's a somehow like there is an ill concept built about the brain. Nobody sees brain as an organ at all. So people see brain as something very mysterious, or something like godly, or it's a very like unbelievable position has been given to the brain, which it actually doesn't deserve. See, it has to be seen just like any other part of the body. It is a kidney or it's a heart or any other part of the body. So we have to give only that much significance to the brain. And how every part of the body can go through a problem, so brain also can go through the problem. So there are a lot of neurochemicals which are functioning in the brain. And imagine the heart does one function, okay, it keeps beating all the time and taking up the blood and pumping it out, and lungs just does one job and it purifies your oxygen, and kidney does one job. So all these things just do one job, and brain does like millions and trillions of jobs at a time. So obviously it has got a very intricate structure. It is like, we were other day we were doing a like a workshop on the nodes and hubs of the brain, like, neuronal circuit. So there is so much of information is going through, so much of information comes out and goes in, and every millisecond there is so much happening in the brain. So people have to recognize that brain is doing so much for us. It is just to keep me survive. It is doing so much job. So it should be my primary job to take care of my brain. Mental health, like probably like the word mental health itself become stigmatized. See, if we go back to the history, earlier it was called demonizing. People who had mental illness were seen as people who are possessed by demons and things like that. So that still has a significant hold on the mental health acceptance by the community. And later it was known as a dramatic behavior. It's a drama, it's a historical. So historicity was added into it. So mental health is evolving through lot of socialized stigmatized. When person had an heart attack, like take him just to the doctor, as simple as that. If I scream a lot and if I take a knife and try to cut my hand, people wouldn't take me to the psychiatrist. If I fail 3 times or 4 times, see, I myself had a struggling days in my MBBS days. I could not never recognize I had an severe ADHD. I could never sit and read at all. So I took a lot of time to pass my MBBS, because like even in the medical college, when every teacher used to meet me, they would advise me like, oh, you're a nice guy, why are you not writing the exam? But nobody said that, why don't you approach a psychiatrist? There may be something wrong with you for not doing what you are supposed to be doing for your age. So that is the most important thing to assess a mental illness, is like, what am I supposed to do at the right time of my age, and what are the emotions I am supposed to be having at the right time of that particular situation. So this awareness has to be brought into people, and people should be told again and again, brain is just an organ. Please do take care of it, because it's going to take care everything about you. If your mental health is lost, everything is lost. You lose wealth by gambling, you lose diabetes, one of the uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, chronic physical disabilities, all are because of poor care of the mental health. It may be in the form of a stress or in the worry. So end of the day, everything comes and falls into the poor care of oneself, including the financially, or it may be relationship wise, or it may be taking care of the children, family wise. Every aspect of the life is controlled by our brain. Okay, so one has to understand the significance of the brain, and understand that brain is functioning with just like a body. If I don't eat food for a long time, so even my body and my brain both are going to suffer. So 20% of the oxygen is consumed by the brain. So you can imagine what is the amount of work which is done by the brain. So everybody has to know, like, this is the common casual lecture I give wherever I go to school children's or teachers per se. Like, identify brain as a simple part of your body, and please do take care of it, so that it will take care of rest of your whole life.
Very, very well said. And I think you brought a very important point, Dr. Lokesh, about this was one of my questions for later stage. The question was going to be about, like, when you have cancer, people feel for you, and then you get the right modality of treatment, and people are there to support. But as soon as you say depression or suicidal ideation, like, people want to stay miles and miles away from you. So you mentioned something like it has been stigmatized. And we will particularly talk in the last half hour about how to destigmatize, who stigmatized it, who's that society, how do we address that society, are we just singing to the choir, or who's the other side that we need to be increasing the awareness on. So definitely, but can you also tell us briefly what are some of the best ways to treat anxiety and depression outside of medication? The reason I asked that question is because Dr. Nila earlier said sometimes the medical system is over medicalizing, which might not be true throughout, but as common general people, they try not to medicate themselves.
Yeah, true. Basically, like every person has got an anxiety about taking the medicine because it's not a life-threatening disease. That's how they perceive. So, non-medical approaches, there are a lot of non-medical approaches, and there are a lot of effective non-medical approaches. See, Niman's Bangalore is doing a lot of work on yoga and anxiety these days, and also we are doing work on yoga and depression also. And there are see the what happens is, like, the mild, moderate, severe. Okay, so we have a category there. So all these things will definitely help for a mild depression or anxiety disorder which is mild in nature, or like to maximum maybe up to the moderate if the person is very educated about it. And of course we have a very successful training technique called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very effective for anxiety as well as for depression. And we have something like JPMR, where we teach the relaxation technique to the patient when they have panic attacks or social anxieties. So those things also work very effectively. But what the client has to understand here is, see, usually we tell, like, you have to make an effort just like a student in the school. Okay, so don't think that you'll just listen to it and like you'll go home and do for 3 days 4 days and you're going to get out of it. It's not going to happen that way. How a student studies to pass his exams, exactly like that, every day, day after day, you got to do it for years. Okay, then probably you're going to achieve the result. People have a tendency to feel easily they can get out of it by listening to these kind of exercises. See, because we take up CBT, so many dropouts will happen by the 6 sessions or 8 session. They just drop out because they cannot follow the steps which has been advised to them. The common person has got an idea that by counseling they will heal me. Okay, that's a wrong perception. What they have to understand is we can only guide them, so they have to heal themselves. So that is the whole motive behind holistic approach or a psychological approaches which we have, other than medicines, whoever want to take care of themselves. So this is the basic core knowledge they should have. I am going to work for myself, and my therapist or my doctor is just going to be an assistant with me. So I am not going to cure him, so he has to cure himself. So I'm just going to be there and help him out. So this is the main thing. Of course there are a lot of yoga has been proved one of the main technique, and now mindfulness is used. Of course, over the period of time it couldn't sustain the popularity it had gained when it had, like, 15 years back when I had started listening about mindfulness. It was like known as, like, okay, the panacea for anxiety disorders. But over the period of time it has become, because maybe because of the people don't practice it, because see,
Sure.
a mindfulness is as good as getting enlightened, be there at the right now, right moment. So that's a tough job actually.
Very well said.
So
Thank you. And we did get a comment from Madhu, who says this is one of the best Just Chat that she is attending. So kudos to all of you for bringing out some of the relevancy to those who are watching us. Carolyn, I do want to go to you with the next question. Is I want to talk about two things with you. One is how important faith is, right? People, though we did say it doesn't discriminate, but do you think our religion or culture or any aspect of our identity, which you definitely talked about earlier, influences how we think about mental health? That is one. And then the financial struggle. So a person realizes they do need to seek help, but then just the medical system, the navigation of it with a person who doesn't have insurance. So what are those modalities that they can take to seek help?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the faith. A lot of times in the African American community, there was a huge stigma within the church community. People would go to their clergyman and talk about, their suicidal tendencies and, schizophrenia. They hear voices, and they were shunned, and they were told that they were demon possessed. So that caused a lot of people to really suffer in silence. And so the suicide rate in the African American church community was at an all-time high. And then the medical community came in and they intervened, and they started going to these African American churches and doing training on mental health. So the clergy could be held accountable, for telling their members that they were demon possessed. So that's one part. And then another part is access to mental health. Because of the high cost of mental health treatment, and for people who don't have insurance, they have an issue, getting, mental health treatment. So a lot of people go undiagnosed, they go untreated because they don't have the insurance. But there are some programs out there. One in particular in Norcross is called Viewpoint Health. So it's a facility where they have a psychiatrist, they have a therapist, they have a nurse. And if you don't have medical insurance, they can still treat you. So Grady Hospital has a similar program. So there are quite a few programs out there that can give access to mental health. But going back to the faith, churches are learning now. They have mental health toolkits where they can easily recognize people who have suicidal tendencies and hallucinations, so they can refer them to mental health providers. And a lot of the larger churches now have psychologists and psychiatrists on their staff. So the taboo is no longer, prevalent like it has been over the decades.
Okay, let me ask you another question before I go to Shama, and then after Shama, I do have a question for Naresh. So are the police, and because you mentioned about it earlier, are the police being trained to understand mental health issues, or is there someone else to call other than the police if anyone is having a mental health crisis?
Well, as you know now in the media, almost every municipality is looking at funding, taking away some of the money from the police and putting it into mental health crisis intervention, funding sources. And I think that will be so much more helpful because the police has a lot to do. They are trained to deal with criminals, and they're not trained to deal with the mental health crises. So if they see someone who's acting out, and the person could have a cell phone and they could think it's a gun, and they just react accordingly. So I think the police should only be called if there's a criminal act, that's taking place. If there's a mental health issue, there should be another, like a 912 number or something that people can call, and they can dispatch a mental health crisis intervention team to come out and de-escalate. Because what's happening now, the police are being called for everything. And it's causing a lot of issues because this guy, I can't remember what city, he was having a mental health crisis, and he was naked. He was in the street, and the cops came out and they put this hoodie over him, and he was suffocated because they didn't know how to handle it. So I think the police are being overly burdened. And so what's happening, a lot of funds are being allocated to these mental health crisis intervention teams now.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you, Carolyn. If you can quickly tell us what you do at Mental Health and with your organization, Mental Health for the African American community.
Okay, so what we're doing now, monthly, we have a Let's Talk About It forum, which we do on Zoom. We were doing them, the brick and mortar, but so now we do Let's Talk About It, and we bring people into the Zoom meeting who have mental illness diagnosis, and they share their journey, what their lives were like before, they were diagnosed, what led up to them having the triggers or the stressors to send them into their first episode. And then we have caregivers to come and share their journey. And then after each person shares his or her journey about their mental illness, we have a mental health professional come and explain exactly what the illness is and what the treatment options are.
Definitely.
And then, so that's one thing that we're doing. And we're also working on putting together a mental health providers network because we want to have a diverse ethnic group of mental health providers in our network. So when people call us, regardless of their ethnic background, we can refer them to someone who they can relate to in our network.
Very good. And we wish you continued success and reaching out many more, those who need help and suffering in silence. So thank you, Caroline. Shama, my next question is to you. Do you think the word abuse is overused or misused? The other question I have is, do you see a predominant of mental health issues among the people whom you see who are domestically abused? And the third thing is, do you see a financial struggle as one? What are the main causes of domestic abuse, though, that with the population that you see? And I'm asking a series of questions, but I think you'll be able to put it all together for us, because just like mental health issues, the decision that a woman takes for a domestic abuse situation can also be stigmatized. So there might be a separation needed, or it might go into divorces, which again, society doesn't accept as easily, sometimes coming from the eastern part of the world. So, so women, if she exposes that she's being abused, is also stigmatized. A woman who's not running a normal family, being abused is also stigmatized. So where are the lines drawn for women?
A good question, Nazeera. When we talk about domestic violence, as we mentioned earlier, domestic violence is all over. You mentioned earlier if it's finance, it's not a finance. I think the causes of domestic violence, it can be like a behavior. Where you raised a child. Is that environment? As I say, the father seeing the abuse in the mother. So why I cannot start with my sister? Why I cannot control my sister? Why I cannot tell my sister, oh, she should not dress like that, why she cannot talk with that boy, she cannot. So it's a kind of learning behavior that the child raised in that environment and seeing it over and over. So the thing for it, to tackle this issue is by educating the youth. And regarding for the women, we all the time we say so much pressure on the women, regarding for domestic violence. All the time we blame the women, that she has to make up, for that marriage, if she go to imam, if she go to priest, if she go to rabbi, or in all the time they bring that religious part, on burden on the woman. They don't listen to the woman's need, they don't listen to her, what's happened, what's going on, is there is any mental issue, because as we can see, mental issue, you cannot see it, it's not like a bruises or something you say, oh, I can fix it. They cannot see that, so all the time there is a blame on the woman, and putting her rather than listening to her concern, they're putting another burden on her that she has to make that marriage to be success, otherwise it will be a stigma in our community, or or somewhere else. So yes, we see a lot of burden on the women, and the thing is just we have to talk about it more. We have to educate the community as well more, and not to be a stigma. We have to speak about it, and we have been seeing so many women now with our agency, And they tell us this thing, it must come up from me, when we do intake with the client, we ask them, have you reached out to any community leaders? Have you talked to your family? Have you? And she said, all the time the blame was on me, not on him, all the time I am wrong. And that it's lead kind of stress to that woman, and that it make a woman doubt about herself, thinking, okay, maybe I am the one, let me try this thing, even family member or community leader telling her, oh, you have to try this thing. And even if she tried that, it's never ever, good for him, and it's never fixed the problem of domestic violence. I see it, and when you take it to the court, then and even some women, they think, oh, if I take him to the court, he may change, or something like that. But it's not like that. Why there are so many layers under that subject. Yeah.
So you've sort of mentioned this twice, that because my dad did to my mom, I can do it to my sister. So is that something a changeable behavior? Might be not. So what is the solution? Because you don't want to see a family separate, or you don't want to see a family breaking up. But are there resources that men or women can take up to make it work, and realize that they are victimizing their spouse?
Well, true. What I'm saying, earlier, it's education. We have to, educate these young children at early age. There is an agency, it's Men Against Domestic Violence. It's down in DCAP, which is what happened, this agency, after the husband gets ex parte, and of the judge order him to do some classes, for kind of the classes, they're supposed to take it, so that they go over there. So yes, there are some resources, yes, but there are also we have to educate our children at early age. You gotta respect, you gotta listen, you gotta that is not the way how you treat your girlfriend, this is not the way how you treat your sister, this is not the way how you talk to your mother. So there is indeed there is an education, it's program, and we see different agency Partnership Against Domestic Violence. They have kind of teen summit, which is they're involved the teenager to talk about domestic violence, and they do some program at the school as well.
Okay, very good. I think the earlier intervention, the earlier the age, the intervention, that's better. So Michelle, I'm going to come to you right after Naresh. Naresh, we can't help again but notice the beautiful picture behind you. Can you tell us why you have that as your background?
Thank you for asking. This is a story of our beautiful daughter, Nima. As you can see, I'm going to step away a little bit, break the stigma for Nima. We lost her. She was a daughter of my classmate, my childhood friend, and married to one of my other side of the family. Just about on last July 24th, we lost her. This particular death has opened up and a channel that we have never even felt. She is going to live with us forever by educating us, by leaving a note after her death we found. And in that, she has mentioned about everything, about how she was feeling. How do I start on this particular subject? It's so devastating. Very loving, was very smiley, just a person that everyone loved her so much. Cannot put the words about how valuable she was, but she has opened up after her the birth. She gave a birth in last December 30th to a beautiful son, Keshav. After that, I think she had developed some sort of issues that we were not able to sense. The family was not able to see. But I think maybe a month later or so, I think they realized there's something wrong, So her husband had medications prescribed and whatnot. But I think some reason she was not willing to take up. But just about 2 weeks ago, my friend came to my office and we sat and we discussed. Me and my wife we discussed at a greater length about her behavior change after the baby. She loved the baby so much, extremely caring, extremely loving. She had a monitor that she was carrying the monitor with her all the time throughout wherever she was going, and the monitor was constantly. So the bond between the mom and a son was so huge uh, that but she had some sort of that thing that we were not able to understand, that like it's like some sort of fear or some sort of thing that is not enough or that nature. First time she went to her dad and mom's home after like maybe about 2 weeks or so after, and then when they were there, when she was there at her home in San Diego, and the parents are trying to figure it out why she is different than the way normally she is, and they were just not understanding the whole math behind her. But this particular thing that was what she was suffering, it just came to know way later when she ultimately took her life, and then the note revealed everything about what she left. But what she did is something that waken us up all and given us some absolutely new directions to go to. Learn something about it. All the professors, all the doctors have already said. Dr. Neela mentioned very nicely about the subject earlier, and so did Faith. Also did that part, and of course Michelle did great. These are the things that we noticed in her. She had a very special bond with the mother-in-law, and just little prior to giving her life, but a month earlier, she had lost older brother-in-law in the same family. So there are multiple things was developing, but it is very hard for me to describe this beautiful daughter of ours that she took some steps that you cannot even imagine I can even describe on this live video, but it had just really shaken us up really big. And the way it has shaken up is like we are constantly talking, and we are going back again all the way to the previous, I would say maybe 4, 5, 7 decades ago, how this family, how those female had given a birth, and then that we were earlier, I think Faith mentioned about some sort of different type of attitude or behavior of the woman or something. It gives us light about all those things, that this particular stigma, this particular thing that Nima gave us an education of. So in general, what it has is just totally give us some different path to look into, understand what is happening, why the person is behaving, what is happening to that person. It is just very, very, very shocking to know that this could happen to someone, just a 6-month-old baby. And right now the family is struggling so much. Husband loved her so much. Now the football season started or celebrated just about a couple of days ago. He was so devastated about, because they were so much of like a cowboy fan. So and they were going together, and now that one thing is missed out from him and missing out from everybody else's life as we lost her. But overall, what I can say to you, to everyone, that what everybody's sharing here is something that nobody knows. Michelle said so beautifully earlier that what is happening and nobody else notices. Same exact thing was with our Nima. Whatever it was happening to her, she was not able to, not sharing it to the level that some actions can be taken. Medication was prescribed, by the way, but she only took one dose, and thereafter she did not. And we don't know why, but at least something that she did to us, that wake up, people, wake up. There's something there, And
Sure. So,
yeah.
Nareshji, from what you are describing, I'm sure the doctors and a few of others have figured out you're probably talking about postpartum depression.
That is exactly correct. That's the first time we ever, personally myself, I had never heard of this thing, and it is. Yeah, proudly I can tell it's illiteracy of mind that I did not even realize what exactly it is. So for me, as a 63 years old man, that come to know about this one at this age, that what has happened. So can you imagine that? As you know, Nazeera, our culture things are different. That the people think earlier that a job has to do, work has to continue, regardless of this, regardless of those things, of a traditional thing. Noor also mentioned earlier about that part, that it is a job of a woman to do. So I guess she was tailoring into those areas also, that I need to do this, I need to do that, I cannot do that, or I will not be able to do it. But her love towards the son is so much, as I was saying earlier, that she never give up that particular, the monitor she had. And believe it or not, the very first time she gave the monitor to mother-in-law, and then there's the last time she gave, and that within few hours she was not with us. So it is something that that particular thing that she had developed within her. I was fortunate to share with my friend, her father. Now we exchanged all the informations what it is, but it did open up so much that this particular person had this much of developing within, but unable to share. But don't forget, she's extremely happy, like loving her elder sister-in-law. They have very good relationship. There is zero issues of any kind. So it was very difficult for us to understand why she did what she did. But there was a reason she did, and it was revealed later. So medication was there, obviously,
Sure. So I know you said she did leave a note, so that gave you more answers, and the education and awareness that your community has started within San Diego area. Some of her notes really must have helped you all towards that direction.
Absolutely. And she left a note, Nazeera, that, hey, please make note to everybody. So imagine this person who jot down every single thing in her phone and left everything for people to know that what this is. And without that note, we would be in lots of different speculations. Her father, my buddy, told me that, and I could not imagine what I would be going through without that note. And that note just put a cap to so many speculations, or this or that, or whatever that you can think of words. But she nailed down every single thing in line by line, and giving an educations to the people. And we are very, very proud to share with you today that she is with us. Like, she left the footprints behind for our community and many other communities, and we are engaging on this particular dialogue on this platform today. And our president, our Bhakta Samaj of US's president, also held an event on this particular subject, and lot more things are coming up. Surrounding communities are learning from this, and message are going so much of viral that this particular person has done something for community by giving of her life in such a tragic way. And she's with us forever. There is no question. And we are sharing here with you on this platform. Thank you for having us to discuss on this part, and giving the light that for all the doctors have given.
Definitely. And thank you, Nareshji. Definitely, postpartum depression is not something that commonly is talked about in families. So definitely with Nima's, or what the family has gone through, you're continuing to increase the awareness. If one of the psychiatrists could quickly take up just one or few sentences before I go for the next question to Michelle about postpartum depression. Rajneesh?
I think it's really painful to listen to the story. And Naresh, thank you for sharing
And he
that.
hasn't even given, and Rajneesh, he hasn't even given the full details. And I heard from him, and it's still in my heart. So even just knowing this much is making an impact.
And I guess it is the important thing is that any life event, whether it's birth of a child or death of a parent or exams or loss of a job, divorce of a marriage, it can all have the social events can also have pressure on mind and stress, and in some ways postmortem depression is quite significant, because we have dedicated departments in hospitals, and they do look specifically for postpartum depression. Again, it's one of those areas where suicides are quite common. My own colleague who I work with, he's a psychiatrist. His wife was a psychiatric nurse, and they trained in Kerala in India. So, and they came over to UK, and at the birth of the first child, it was love marriage. Birth of the first child, she didn't tell anyone, and she killed herself. So he was left with less than a year-old child, completely devoid of anybody else to support him. So it is something which my friend who still works with us here, things have moved on. It's 40 to 20 years now since that, and the child is now in university. But it is something which is very close to us, suicides, and whether it's through the birth of a child or a death of a parent. The only difference, I guess, is sometimes when there is a loss of somebody's died, people are more attuned to loss, and they might speak to people about loss. Whereas when there is a birth of a child, it doesn't automatically come to people's mind to say, actually, how are you feeling? How's all these things working out for you? Because everybody assumes the other person must be having a good time to have a child. And that's one of the difficulties with depression, is people assume the facade outside is the real you inside, and real you inside might actually be quite suffering and be too frightened to share that to somebody else, because they don't want to burden anybody, they don't want to tell anybody, and they're quite happy to keep that facade to say everything's fine, I don't need help, I can manage the child, I can manage my health, I can manage the family. So yeah, sorry, it's a bit long-winded, but I do think it is more common than we give credence to, postpartum depression. And it's not just after
Definitely.
the first child, it could be after the third child. So at different stages of life, it could present itself.
Definitely. And this is something probably we should educate continuously to the in-laws as well, because knowing, coming from India, definitely women were not given time off, just because you're a mom and you have to continue with the work and you can't express how you feel. So probably this education will increase their awareness to them as well. So Michelle, let's go back to during and after 2016. Tell me, how did you make a turnaround? Because I think many people want to hear. We left that halfway there. And also, what is your best suggestion for destigmatizing mental illness or learning disabilities among students, adults, adolescents?
So in terms of a turning point, I feel like I still have to manage my mental illness. There's no, I wouldn't say there's a turning point where like I feel pretty good and I don't have to worry about it anymore. That's definitely not the case. And I think that's the difference between me now recognizing that mental illness doesn't just go away with medicine. You still have to manage it, but before, before 2010, for example, I didn't know any difference. And then between 2010 and 2016, I'm like, well, I'm taking medicine, everything is great, I feel great, everything around me is doing great, so I'm going to be okay. Now I have to put myself in check. There's times where I feel the stressors, there's different stressors that are happening. And just recently, I will say, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a moment where I wouldn't say I was planning my death, but I had a lot of stressors in different ways. And because of my support system, I knew it. I was crying a lot. I had to excuse myself from supper from the rest of my family because I couldn't keep my composure. I couldn't stay, and I didn't want to talk about it. I mean, that was another problem. I wasn't willing to talk about it. I just wanted to isolate myself, and I did. I stayed in my bedroom. I didn't want to get out of bed. I cried for hours just by myself in my bedroom. And it was the next day, maybe, that it was my mother-in-law who actually said to me, like, what's going on? What's going on? You need to start taking care of yourself. You haven't showered. You've been wearing the same clothes, that kind of stuff. And it was like, oh, they're paying attention. My in-laws, my family is actually paying attention. They're noticing the downward spiral. They're seeing it, and they're actually saying something which never happened before. But I think because of what happened before, they're like, oh, we all need to step up and recognize if there's a behavior change, we need to address it. So, I mean, that was only a couple of weeks ago. This is not just, recently after 2016's incident where I had attempted to take my life. This was just only a couple of weeks ago. So it was something that I recognized, like, all right, I have to, go back to journaling, go back to those coping, go back to those, what did I do when I was going into therapy? Do I need to call my therapist again to have regular appointments, or what did I do differently, and get myself back into that self-management of this. My medicine's working great. It's just that it's not perfect. It is an ongoing management. And I think I am very grateful that I have a support system who recognizes, and it took years. This is not like an overnight thing. I mean, my in-laws have never experienced what I experienced in 2016, and they were there when I attempted my life. They were present. So it was a shock to them. But then it was an education opportunity. So they recognized it a couple of weeks ago, told me, like, you need to take a shower. You need to start taking care of yourself. Take a break. You don't need to be working right now. You can take a break, do something for yourself. And that's when, like, that was the reality, like, oh my goodness, I need to take care of myself. And it took their support to, like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. It doesn't have to end in suicide. I can do this. But it's recognizing that I have to take ownership. And I think, one of, the doctor had mentioned something about that as well. Is like, you can't expect a therapist to cure you. I have to do it. I have to be actively involved. So that's, there's no turning the corner, kind of say, I'm still managing it. This is not something that goes away.
Very well said, Michelle. One more question I have for you is, do you want others to talk about your story, or refer to someone with a mental illness, or would you rather be known as a wonderful human being, or does it matter either way?
I would like to think that I'm still a wonderful human being, but I think being a human, we all have challenges, and that's just normal. In that sense, there's times where I like sharing my story, and there's times where I just don't want to, just because I might be triggered by my own story. But at the same time, I've known people who've struggled, and I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be in a psychiatric hospital. I know the stigma that goes into it. I know the people that, I've been to a psychiatric hospital here in Georgia, and I was in one in Delaware. There are commons, they both have stuff in common, and then they have stuff that's not in common, but the stigma is still there. I don't mind sharing it. I want to share it, but I also have to recognize and say, like, there's times where, like, I don't want to share it right now. Like in that 2016, I didn't share that. I think this is the first time I've shared it publicly, was the 2016. Like, my immediate family knew, but I don't think the public knew until now about my 2016 incident. And that's fairly recent.
Right. And that's the reason I asked you that. I think sharing your story sort of empowers many others that this challenge exists, and what are the things that they can do to seek help or cope, or I don't want to use the word cope, manage, manage the impact. So thank you, Michelle, again. I just want you to know we love you. And
That's
you
nice.
can call any of us here on the screen and they'll all tell you they love you too. So reach out to us anytime, even if you just want to have chai, just come over. Okay. So see, there you go. And cheers. So cheers. So Dr. Lokesh, let's talk about the reality, right? Social media and the media. Do you think media or social media calls mental illness as it is, or do you think we are getting less highlights, or people always get highlighted, in other illnesses get highlighted, but mental illness somehow only certain organizations do it. Social media has its own pros and cons. We talked about being bullied, being stigmatized, group of friends, rumors starting. It affects men and women on either side. So the reason I'm
Yeah.
talking about all this is what are your suggestions to destigmatize mental health, and sometimes how the own family or friends are creating the conditions worse?
Okay. As we know that social media is always a double-edged sword. It can be harmful also, and it can be useful. Most importantly, what I am noticing in the recent days is a lot of youths are picking up one poster or one sentence in the poster, and tagging on themselves to that and reposting it. And especially about personality disorders, I see a lot of posters which keep flying around, and sometimes they misinterpret the whole situation, or one or two behaviors which would be like probably happened or once or twice in their relationship, probably they misinterpret. So whatever posters which are being published by the educationalist, psychologist or psychiatrist, they have a comprehensive knowledge which is provided to that, because there are millions and trillions of posters are they available on Instagram now, and there is a lot of non-accurate knowledge is also spreading over. But whoever is actively into the area and who are doing a wonderful job and educating a lot of people about it and having a lot of Instagram talks actually to clear a lot of doubts on the matter. A lot of youths, especially like, those who are like 20, 21, 22, 23, a lot of people are getting involved in, especially in India, mental health issues. And Indian government has also taken up awareness very actively, like how as school going children we used to see polio drops ads on buses and walls of the municipal walls. Like that, now mental health awareness has been painted over the bus actually, like, it's a depression, go seek mental health. And there is extensive work has been happening in India, especially right now, especially in Karnataka, with the help of Nimans. So we are doing a lot of works. And till COVID happened, we were having a lot of mental health camps in so many public places, so that it will get destigmatized. So I have a mental health, so I'll come to the camp, like general medical camp, how diabetic camps are happened. The same way we used to have mental health camp. Now we don't have that man-to-man connection right now. So social media is definitely doing a good thing. And especially see these kind of awareness where legitimate people are involved in discussions and debates and things like that. Definitely, this is also like social media form, whichever right now we are in. So these kind of things are definitely very useful. And only thing is the crowd has to choose what they would like to know about, whom to follow and what to do. That is the most important thing. For right now, Facebook and Instagram and a lot of other activities are really happening very well. And I mean, what surprised me recently is like randomly, the youths keep tagging me to their Instagram post and asking me whether can you talk about specific diseases, like, whether it's a OCD or it's a only anxiety disorder or a relationship issues. So there is a lot of awareness which is pumped in. And this COVID period, a lot of COVID and stress, so many thing happened, and so many online consultation all of a sudden boom. But there is a lot of cracks also in this area that one has to know. They exploit a lot actually, because their job is not to help you, but just to scare you more, and make some use benefit for themselves. So we have to be very much aware. And everybody who would like to, I usually keep suggesting, allow people to display their certificates or whatever. There should be some credibility, for whatever help you are seeking from whomever, because this holistic thing or a lot of other activities which, see, as a doctors, we are not allowed to, especially in India, we have a government rule not to publicize ourselves. But it is not the same for other fraternities, like the holistic fraternities. So they come up with huge amount of advertisements for all the mental health, and these religious people, few of course do, like I get a lot of references from religious people too. They send them to psychiatrists saying it's not a religious issue, or you're not possessed by anything. But there are a lot of exploitation, and government has brought up a bill also recently to say that any mental health person cannot be harassed. Taking them to the religious institution constitutes to human rights, yeah, aberration. So it is nice thing that recently India is taking up mental health as a primary thing, and there is a new revised bill. Right now things are happening well in India. Hope that, of course, like how much ever we talk about it, end of the day, as Michelle mentioned, that there will be a stigma for our own self about that starts from the home. So allow our children to accept mental health, and allow our children to respect other person who has got a mental health, and extend compassion rather than bullying. So teach kids with compassionate behavior, probably over the period of time, 5 to 10 15 years to 20 years down the line, probably will have a very healthy atmosphere for the mental health.
Definitely. And Dr. Lokesh and Shama, you both should connect on a different level, because Shama, you'll be happy to know Dr. Lokesh, of course, loves his wife, but also allows her the freedom to be on spotlights. So he's not in competition with her. So he gives her the
Yeah.
support. Go ahead, Dr. Lokesh.
Yeah, I mean, like, my logic is that if your wife is successful, you don't have to do anything for her happiness. She's going to take care of it. So you can relax and enjoy her happiness too.
Definitely. Very well said. A very important lesson for many spouses out there. So Rajneesh, I'm going to ask you one specific question that one of the attendees asked, and then I want you all want us, since it's the sort of the time is ending, we want to give some closing comments. So after answering this question, please give your closing comments, and then we'll go through each one for the closing comments before we close out. So the question that's being asked is there a correlation between ADD or ADHD drugs that school kids are sometimes forced to take, and the increased cases and concerns mental health amongst school and college kids?
I think they're two separate issues. So in UK at least, ADHD drugs are controlled, so they can only be prescribed by a prescribed psychiatrist. And ADHD is not easily, ADHD medication isn't easily dished out to kids. So there's a hierarchy of behavioral and social support and educational support which goes into. So for example, if a child is having difficulty with their homework or concentrating on class, you might have a teacher sitting alongside the person, like a teaching assistant, sitting and helping them with their notes, preparing notes, prompts for their education, and also having targets to improve their submissions of homework and support. So because of the holistic support, especially in the UK, the medication isn't always primary in treatment. Having said that, I've also noticed that some kids do really well on ADHD drugs, and it's been life-changing. Their grades improve, their attention, concentration improves. And a child when he's on ADHD drugs, because there is the tension in the session. I do recall a story where I was still a trainee, and this kid played football, and I know you call soccer in US, but essentially the rule is you don't touch your hand to the football. You kick the football with the hand, but because the kids knew he had ADHD, they would put the ball up in the air, and he would reach out and touch it because he couldn't figure out that he was 7, 9, 10 years. He couldn't figure out you can use your head, you can use your body, but can't use your hand. But he would touch it, and he'd get a red card. He'll sit outside. He'd get upset. So part of the work is actually to say, well, give him a bit of leeway. If he touches it once, it's fine. You can give a green card, then a yellow card. But when he went on to medication, we put other educational help in place. But when he went on to medication, one of the first things he said is, I don't get red card in the football pitch anymore because I put my hands behind. And that is, there is pride, there is positivity. So I think there is difference in prescribing of ADD medication in US as opposed to any other parts of the world. In UK, it's much lower. So I think that that leads to lesser behavioral problems in that small group of people. So not all kids who are diagnosed with ADHD gets the medication. And the second thing is they're all on a spectrum. With age, kids get better. So part of the support structure is actually help them get through the phase of education, making sure they attain the rightful grades, making sure they don't get into the wrong crowd or get in trouble with the police. But medication is given, but it's not the first line in UK at least.
Sure. Why don't we close out with your closing comments from each one of you?
So you want to start with me?
Yes.
Nazeera, thank you for organizing this. It has been really, it's lovely to see my college mates Lokesh and Nazeera. It's lovely to see you after so many years. And I have learned so much speaking to everybody around. I think they have spoken from the heart and from the mind. There is no difference between heart and the mind, and true emotions. And I was completely riveted listening to it. And thanks for sharing, and thanks for doing this wonderful job. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajneesh. Thank you so much. Naresh ji.
Again, I just echo what Dr. Raj says. Indeed, this is a very educational, very informative, and listening to the stories such as Michelle's is just mind-boggling that we have learned something very, very heavy about this particular and many other subjects. Dr. Neela also put so much light about how it happens. Lokesh Babu said beautifully. Everyone else, so did about the police thing. Faith put the light on very seriously. And Noor, thank you very much, Noor, for putting all the light as well. This is such a it's an unbelievable path of knowledge that we are having today with this particular, maybe I would say, stigma of COVID, I guess, but this one is really changing the lives of everyone around us, with someone's losing a life and someone is struggling day-to-day basis, putting something into a perspective for betterment of others. And we as a social media, Dr. Lokesh Babu said, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's a productive and sometimes it's a very, very detrimental. But I'm proud to share with you that our community is using today Zoom, for example, even for entertainment purpose, by lightening the people, elders from young to from the musical thing. We have a great community volunteers that are doing a fabulous thing, and this channel is working out really well. Thank you very much for this one.
Thank you, Naresh, for taking your time to join us. Dr. Nila, probably you are in the early hours of like probably 2:30 a.m. and you're still smiling. So please go ahead with your comments, closing comments.
Thank you, Nazeera, for your wonderful effort. As we heard from the psychiatrist about the general mental illness, as well as personalized, categories like the postnatal depression, domestic violence, and Michelle, your personal experience, it was really very touchy to hear that kind of a lived experience. And I come from Sri Lanka, Tamil, a minority group, where my community fled from the country, facing the war, witnessing the loss of their families, children running to bunkers with the hearing of choppers, and then trying to move out of the country, seeking for a safe place, like forcefully displaced from their home, so home away from home, and then going through the adjustment with different cultural difficulties, trying to find a place where they are stuck between what their children want and what they want. And then even as they go to the aging phase, being in that loneliness, the thought of ending their life in a place far away from their home. So a lot of traumas, post-traumatic stress disorders, survivors' guilt, huge amount. So there are lots, as what you asked Nazeera to talk about or list about the mental illness. It's wide, it's immense. But this is where we all take this effort to create this awareness that yes, we do face problems in life, but let us identify that and let us seek help, because there is help. And when you get that help, you can change your life much better. And as what you said, Michelle, the lived experience, it's like a person on the other end of what do we call a ropey bridge, saying, I know how I crossed this bridge, so I know how it can be difficult, but I am telling you, trust in yourself, believe on the support that you have on there, hold on to it, and come towards what you see as your goal or your future, and when you talk this out, it's a big hope for a lot of people. In Australia, the Royal College encourages lived experiences, people to come out and talk about lived experiences. We have that in our recovery-oriented programs here in the model for our patients' recovery. And the same way, generally, like in school, I envision seeing, the mental health awareness as a part of a general school education, at least from that adolescent period of 14 plus onwards, to see or know about their emotions, their feelings, and to talk about and express their feelings. And why is it so important to do that? That has to come from the school education. The children need to be aware of it. And normally too, like even without mental illness, people to start talking about positive psychology. You don't have to really go to the mental illness to start seeing future or hope, even while you're being well. It's important for you to keep seeking positivity, optimism, meaning for your life, and that changes everything, not just for that individual, but the family, the community, the entire world, because we need to change. We are stuck in a different phase now. So it's a great effort, Nazeera, and we need this wonderful job, and wonderful job to all of you for your contributions here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nila, for your participation as well. Very insightful thoughts there. Dr. Lokesh?
Yeah. As Rajni said, it was really nice because I keep seeing his photos. Arish keeps posting them on the line, and nice to see and listen to him. And it's same with you, Nazeera. And Naresh, very excellent job you are doing actually. See, we want something like that to happen in India, but in India is still people are not like outspoken, or they don't still come out, or they do not have so much of community service oriented motives, so they just suffer on their own and do not actually involve in the community. Probably looking at your model, probably we can do something related to that in our area and group also. And the one who's working with abused women. It's a wonderful job because I had a few clients from US who were arrested for one continuous year in the house because husband didn't give them passport. So only when they came back to India, they were able to reveal to the mother that they were abused in the house. And the mother thought like it is just every family go through the fight between husband and wife. So what, you go back. So until the girl showed the marks of the belt and beaten by the husband. So later I have to counsel them to hold her back and get her stay in India and do the necessary legal procedures for her, because it does happen in migratory communities. Too much it happens. And Michelle, congratulations, very brave effort you did recently. You had that intense depression and you could survive that, and it's wonderful. And please do remember that you can actually always get that help and recognize yourself and recognize your worth, and you can come out of it. And thank you everyone for wonderful inputs. Thanks a lot, Nazeera, once again.
Thank you, Dr. Lokesh. Really, it's great to see you and Rajneesh specifically also after a long time. So we wish you all the best and continued success. Carolyn?
Well, Nazeera, it was nice seeing you after X number of years, and this was so informative. And it's just nice to be in the presence of people from around the globe, and how we can all strive to remove the stigma and break the chains of silence.
Thank you, Carolyn. And again, we wish you continued success in your organization to help many others. Michelle?
So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for everybody for listening. I think that's one big step, at least for someone who struggles, is having someone who is actually listening, because we often think that no one would care. I think one of my closing statements would be, if you're telling somebody who is struggling that there is hope, recognize that the person who is struggling doesn't see it, that it doesn't exist. And instead pursue some action and recognize that they are struggling, just recognizing that. But recognizing that when there's someone who's struggling and you see a behavior change, say something, do something. Like I said, in my 2016 incident, I explicitly said I was going to end my life, and not like the people who it's not like they didn't care. They just didn't recognize the severity of it and just didn't think it was that emergent. I should have gone to the hospital that morning, to a psychiatric hospital, as soon as I said it. Instead, I tried to take my life. I went to obviously another hospital first to get stabilized, and then I was sent to a psychiatric hospital because I made the attempt. But don't be afraid to even ask the question, are you going to harm yourself? Do you feel that you're going to harm yourself? Because that's not going to trigger someone to actually end their life. They're already thinking about it. I mean, by actually engaging, you're allowing them to open up and say, oh, wait a minute. And that is a huge relief. That can be a huge relief. And then it's enough for them to take action, like, okay, I want to stop this. Because if they're saying it, they want help. It's not like they are saying it because they've not only given up hope on themselves, but they really don't want to die. So taking the action, and don't be afraid to even ask the question, are you going to kill yourself? Because chances are they've already thought that, and it's given them an answer, given them an opportunity to actually say, yeah, I'm not doing well. So thank you again for everybody. I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me share my story.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And we'll continue to be connected. How about you, Shama?
Thank you, Nazeera, for the opportunity, and thank you for the panelists for their input. It was really wonderful sessions. I just want to share that if anybody come to you and share with you that's being like abused in the family and from the spouse or from the boyfriend or partner, you know, please just listen to them. Don't be prejudgment over there. Help them, like, you know, to get the resource, and don't put that stigma. Don't blame them, you know, because sometimes, well, I told you last time to leave him, but you did not, so you choose. We cannot do that. We, you know, they come to you, they need help, and advise them, give them a resource, just go online, get them some resources. Also check on them, you know, just like, you know, just a phone call or quick text. Hey, how are you doing today? Do you need anything? That it help, like, you know, person to come out from that stigma, and we can stop the domestic violence and the taboo of domestic violence. And thank you to everyone being here today.
Thank you so much. Such wonderful knowledge and wisdom that was shared today. And thank you to all the listeners. We went probably a few minutes beyond our ending time, but just the closing comments had very good information. And Dr. Lokesh, I caught you for hazing me back. I'm making you sleepy already. So I know it's already 11:30 in India. So we wish you all a relaxed rest of the evening. Our Chai and Chat are monthly sessions. Our next session is in October, and we'll keep you posted. And thank you to Bytecraft Productions and Vendorship for their continuing support. And please stay strong, reach out for help, friends, families, to therapists, counseling sessions, etc. And know your worth and find your purpose in life, and that'll help us all keep our journey forward. It's not the destination, it's actually the journey. So enjoy your journey, and I'm glad you shared your journey with us today, all the panelists. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.